Good afternoon. This is Rick Brandenburg, and I'm one of the scientists associated with the Peanut Innovation Lab project, and I'm from North Carolina State University, along with David Jordan. And I'm going to begin this educational session and just talk about a number of topics, some of them more or less of an introductory nature, to help set the stage for David Jordan following up and talking a lot about the research that's had been underway and some of the new information we have and some of the new guidelines we have through the new production manual that has just been updated. So one of the things I want to do is talk about what we're going to focus on in this coming production season, talk about some of the new research findings, talk about some of the new strategies, the ways that we think perhaps are optimal ways to move forward with groundnut production, and also the new production guide, which we spent a lot of time on this past year, adding to it, taking the latest research information and upgrading it. And then finally, we want to talk a little bit about risk management because whether you're a large commercial operation or a smallholder subsistence type farming system, risk management is at the core of what we do. Ways to produce a quality crop that is marketable and we can make a profit on, all has various risk issues as we go along through the production season and eventually into harvest, storage, and marketing. So we'll talk about that as well during this session. One thing I want to touch on, because I know there's been a lot of research underway from various agencies, various groups, and even done privately by various commercial operations. And I just want to spend some time helping us understand the importance of research, but also helping us understand why we do research the way that we do, how we take the information and try to digest it and absorb it and put it to use. And one of the things that is really important is we do this research as much as possible throughout the production area because of differences in climate, differences in weather, differences in soil types, in rotations, everything. There's going to be variations, and if we just look at the research results from one isolated area, it's probably not going to give us a good feel about the bigger picture. Another area is looking at how we do our research, and we recommend and we use randomized small plots where you repeat the treatment multiple times at various locations throughout the research area. And that's really important, and I'm going to touch on that here in just a few minutes as to why we do that and how critically important that is. And the third thing is that we try to do our research so it represents the real world. David Jordan and I obviously do research in the laboratory. We do research in glass houses or greenhouses. But much of our research is done in the field, and we want it to demonstrate what happens in farmers' fields or on commercial farms as much as possible so it has great application in the area where we do the research, and that everybody can take this information, feel confident that our research findings represent more than likely what's going to happen on their farm. So I've got a list of challenges that can make it more difficult to interpret data from research, and I just want to go through these actually relatively quickly. I've already mentioned the consistency of being able to evaluate the research in the whole production area, and oftentimes we see great discrepancies across the production region, that we see one product or one approach work better in this area than the other, and that's nothing unusual. That's very typical that due to whatever reasons, whether it be the weather, whether it be the soil type, specific farming practices, we often see different results in different areas, and that's why we need to do our research in different areas. The other is replication. That's where we repeat the treatment in small plots multiple times in the test area, and to explain why we do that. And this is just an example of some research plots. It's a 4-treatment test that has 5 replicates. And if you look at the bottom row, it has 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those would represent the 4 treatments. They might be fertilizer, they might be varieties, it could be a lot of things. And then the rows that go up from there are all replicates or repetitions. And as you can see, the numbers are in different orders, and that's so that, for example, treatment number 1 is at different places in the overall research plot. And if you look at the arrow on the left-hand side, it shows changes in soil types as you go up and down, and the arrow horizontally on the bottom shows changes in drainage. And that's very typical. Very few research areas are completely consistent over the whole area of the research. So we replicate and we randomly distribute where every treatment is so that one treatment doesn't end up in one particular area of the plot where, say, the soil type is very specific or the drainage characteristics are very specific or whatever, and another treatment ends up on the other side of the plots. It's so that it's randomly distributed so that we can help overcome those differences in soil types and in drainage or whatever it might be. And it helps give us more reliable information. So this replication or repetition of the plots at different places is really critical for us to be able to feel confident in the data that we obtain. So going down the third line under there, 1 year means nothing. And what I mean by that is you can set out research trials in a single year and you get some results that just show that this approach, these agronomic practices, these inputs just look really impressive and you really feel excited about this is the best way in the future to move forward. Well, what you know from that is that those agronomic practices or those inputs worked really well in that one specific year. In that year where perhaps the weather was a certain manner and, all these sorts of things. So really it means those practices worked well in that year. And we don't know how well they're going to work the following year. Hopefully they'll work well the next year, but we don't know that until we test it. So multi-year testing is really, really important. And I just want to show you real quickly, we have an insect early in the season in the southeast United States called a thrips. It feeds on the plant as soon as it cracks through the soil. It stunts the plant, and if you see the photo on the left, it's an untreated area, so the plants are stunted as compared to the plants in the photo on the right, where they received an in-furrow or with the seed insecticide that is systemic and helps protect the plant. It's very important for us to get this protection early in the season, get the crop off to a good start. Well, here's some data that, from 2019 and 2020. If you look at the two bars on the very left, the blue or grayish bar represents 2019 and the other bar represents 2020. And these are both untreated plots. And the scale on the left that goes from 0 to 7 just indicates how much thrips or insect damage there was. The higher up the scale, the more damage there was. So I want you to look on the left-hand side. The first two bars there are the performance in 2019 and 2020 for an insecticide called aldicarb. The next two sets of bars are the performance of an insecticide in 2019-2020, an insecticide called Forate. And if you just looked at 2019 data for aldicarb, because that gray or bluish bar is taller, which means more damage, you would say that aldicarb is not nearly as good as Forate, because if you look at the bar for that one in 2019, it's very short, which means it gave good control. However, if you look at the results for 2020, you see that the aldicarb bar is very short, meaning it gave great control in 2020, and the bar, the orange or tan bar for Forate in 2020 was much taller. So basically, we got a real flip-flop of results from 2019 to 2020, and this is why you have to repeat trials multiple years so that you really feel confident in what is the performance over a long period of time, which one really is the best. And the reason for that, sometimes we can figure out why it happens, sometimes we can't. For us, the difference between 2019 and 2020, in May is when we typically plant most of our groundnuts in North Carolina. The month of May in 2019 was 6 degrees C warmer than the month of May in 2020. So under the very warm conditions, the one product outperformed the other. In the next year, when it was cooler, the other product performed better. That's something we very commonly see, and is why we repeat these trials for multiple years. So just to drop down a little bit lower there in the middle of the list, confusing factors. Oftentimes there can be other factors that overwhelm the actual treatment that we're looking for. And we've seen this a lot to look at actual, populations, seeding rates, and all that, because we run into issues with good seed germination. And when we plant a certain number of seeds in a row, we hope we get a specific plant population, but sometimes that hasn't always happened, and the desired plant population just never happens in that research plot. So we get these confusing factors or complicating factors of poor germination that make our actual plant populations not what we hoped for. And as a result, it takes us a lot more research and a lot longer time to actually come up with the appropriate seeding rates and plant populations. So we do those trials again, multiple times, multiple locations with multiple varieties. We got other factors that create variability from year to year. The specific fields and the soil types can have a huge difference. The weather, the amount of rainfall we get, which we know in Malawi is quite variable, not only in the amount, but at the time of year when it starts, variations in temperatures, even rotations in different fields and different locations can all affect the research result that we get. So that's again why we do it in multiple locations for multiple years, so we have a high level of confidence in our research. So just finishing up then, we get a lot of issues with biases and sampling, and a research study is only as good as the sampling that we take. And we really have to avoid biasing our sampling where we sample from the healthy plants or we sample from the sick plants or whatever. It has to be a representative sampling that is random, and it takes into account all the plants that would be in a research plot, and just not the healthy ones or just not the sick ones. So that's really important, and that leads us to where we can do a high quality analysis and ultimately really feel good about the results that we've got and the recommendations that we make. So one question that I also get a lot of, and can't we just do a lot of fields in 1 year, do a lot of research studies in 1 year, and instead of doing them for multiple years, we're just going to do a lot of them, a lot of different soil types, a lot of different locations, and then we can just move forward and feel really good about things? Well, the answer to that one again is no. Because even though you may be doing the trials in a variety of regions, different altitudes, different soil types, and all these sorts of things, you're still doing them under the weather conditions that happened during that year. And, there is no such thing as normal weather. And so, again, yes, you get a lot of very valuable information from a lot of different soil types, a lot of different locations, but you're obtaining it all under a specific set of environmental conditions. So while there's nothing wrong with doing a lot of fields and a lot of research sites, that doesn't allow you to overcome or not do it multiple years. So just quickly here, David's going to talk a lot about the production guide or the production manual. We put quite a bit of effort into it this past year. We've tried to put more detail in it and address some issues that we got some feedback that there needed to be more specific inputs, more information on various products that you could use, more information on plant populations, seeding rates, more specifics on harvest dates, etc. And I think we have effectively done that. We've taken all the research information that's available, and we have tried to incorporate it into the manual. We've also added a lot more photos and illustrations, particularly with things like maturity, pod maturity, and how to measure that. So we hope that you'll find this very useful and a step up from where it had been in the past. And then we also, at the end of the production guide, we talk a lot about risk management and a system that we have to help make more informed decisions based upon the risk to yield, based upon the risk of aflatoxin. And we hope that you'll find this is not only educational to help you understand groundnut production, but you can also use it to, again, produce yield or increase yield and profit. So what is a risk index? A risk index simply is where we try to take and put a number or a value on every decision you have to make, regardless of the type of farming operation you have, whether you just have a very limited amount of land and it's subsistence farming, or whether you have a large commercial operation with thousands of hectares. Every decision you make has some risk associated with it. Well, every decision you make is improved and risk can be reduced with the more information you can pull into that decision-making process and the more informed decision you can make. So David Jordan and I have been doing groundnut research. We've been training farmers and training various organizations on highly productive groundnut research for a combined total of over 70 years. So what we have is we have a lot of knowledge. Some of it's from research, some of it's from just simply the time we've spent in the field and from our experiences and all that. And so if one of you ask a question about a particular decision in groundnut production, we would take all that research, all the things we've read, all the experiences we've had in the time we've spent in the field, and we would develop the best answer to give you based on all that information. And the reality is, when David, Jordan, and I are no longer involved in groundnut production, that information will kind of be lost. We'll take it with us. So what we're trying to do with a risk index, also sometimes called an expert system, is we're trying to take all our information, put it in one location, and then develop a sliding scale of risk based upon which way you go with your decision. And that decision is based on all the available information that we have. So this information is useful for decision making, but hopefully it's also an educational process to help you better understand groundnut production, the value of inputs, the response you get to those inputs, and the risk associated with those inputs. So just to help you understand this, many years ago, I worked with a pest problem called spider mites in North Carolina. And this is not an insect, but it's more closely related to a spider. And it's almost a microscopic pest that feeds on the underside of peanut leaflets, and the numbers can just get incredibly high, and it can actually kill the groundnut plant. Here you see on the left a photo of the tiny mites, and then on the right you see a field that has just been devastated by these. And what happens is these always happen during hot and dry weather conditions, but there are certain things we do in the field that encourage an outbreak of these spider mites. And one of them is if we spray an insecticide to control like caterpillars, then we kill off many of the beneficial insects that normally would feed on these mites. So we understand that spraying an insecticide might cause the mites to get more abundant. But what we didn't understand was why when we sprayed a fungicide, the mites got different. I mean, a fungicide's attacking fungi. It's not attacking the mites. So why did they get worse? Well, research on that, and just to simplify this graph, the scale going up on the left is the number of mites. On the very right-hand side, you see untreated. That's how many mites we had per leaflet when we didn't do anything. And I want to go back all the way to the left. The tallest bar there is a combination of an insecticide, which kills off the beneficial insects that would feed on the mites, and a fungicide sprayed for leaf spot that also kills off a fungus that attacks and kills the mites. So what we did with an insecticide and a fungicide application, we eliminated all the natural enemies of the mites that normally kept them in control and allowed their numbers to increase dramatically. So we take that information then, and instead of spraying just on a monthly basis or weekly basis or whatever, we spray only when necessary. We help preserve the natural enemies of the spider mites, and we make spider mites so that they're not really a problem. And that's the kind of information we integrate into a risk index type management program, so that when you make a decision to do something and treat one problem, are there any other problems that you unknowingly could be created? So that's really kind of the basis of this. And David Jordan will explain this in much more detail in just a few minutes. So risk management, we try to link all the things we know and every decision we make and all the things that we do, and make sure that you understand the impact of those decisions. positively and whether there's any negative that goes along with that. And hopefully over time, this is going to help you be much better in your decision-making process for groundnut production. And finally, just want to mention really quickly, we're initiating a program this year where we're going to be looking at seed quality. We know seed quality is an issue. We know that there's issues that we can address in the production of seed, in the drying of seed, in the storage, as well as various planting parameters. So we're going to be working on that. So I'll look forward to getting new information on that in the next year after we've had a chance to go through it for a year. And we'll try to keep you updated on that as we try to improve seed quality, which ultimately improves the profitability of groundnut production. So with that, I'm going to end my portion, and David Jordan is going to take over and talk about a lot of different factors, disease management, and I think he's going to finish up with risk management, and we hope that helps. And we like feedback when you finally get a hold of the groundnut production guy, that you give us feedback on additional areas where we can continue to build on that and make it the best possible information for you.